Hey neighbor, welcome back to the glam rock era of the 70s. My name is John, and today I'm talking about the long-awaited sophomore album Zeros by the English alternative artist Declan McKenna. I was the only YouTuber with a following that covered Declan's debut album What Do You Think About the Car to my knowledge, which is really surprising for a couple of reasons, the first of those being he has a pretty big loyal fan base, and also I had a lot of requests to cover that, and of course this new one here in 2020. There were a few delays on Zeros, the second of those making zero sense to me, if you will, but whatever, let bygones be bygones, it's finally here! His debut grabbed my attention with its consistently sharp lyrical palette and through the protest spirit that used some clever songwriting techniques to wring out the pain that he saw in the world around him. With album 2, he's pretty clearly decided to pull from more personal experiences, which makes sense. I'm just glad I gave this a few extra chances to hit me, because I was about to sit down and write a review, and it just didn't feel like I'd gotten that perfect listen through the album. Life kept getting in the way, so I waited. Now that I've settled into the black hole atmosphere of Zeros after absolutely loving the first two singles, was the young Declan McKenna able to keep the rest of the roads paved in gold? If we want to slap a label on things, I'd say album 1 was under the umbrella term indie rock with some obvious nods to classic rock, but Zeros is much more apparent with its inspirations from yesteryear. Tapping into Wavelength side tag is somewhere between Paul McCartney's time with Wings, Elton John, and James Mercer of the Shins and Broken Bells fame. Razzle-dazzle pianos light up this record like a fireworks display with enough stadium-ready guitar and vocal hooks to keep a crowd on their feet all night long. It's massive sounding is what I'm getting at least 3/4 of the runtime, refusing to back down, even if it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to just dial it back a tad here or there. Any rock and roll purist is gonna need at least one listen through Zeros, just to hear what all the buzz is about, since yes indeed, Declan and his band tore a hole in the space-time continuum to make this very flashy sounding record that tracks some groovy bass licks, intricate guitar structures, and improved lyrics that do a really solid job at recognizing the struggle of humanity without feeling overindulgent. You can tell that Declan's songs come from a place of genuine frustration or contemplation, considering how most of them play out with a fun balance between rocking the hell out and that initial point of inspiration. The balance makes sense when you listen to the music too, since there's a huge case to be made for this being a pure throwback album, but the touches of modulated synths and occasional programmed drums add a light modern touch that often feels pretty refreshing. Zeros is really neck and neck with Declan's debut, which makes it such a tough call even after revisiting that first record. On paper, they're not that different, more like brothers born a few years apart that obviously have similar interests but don't always do everything the same way. I think he has improved as a lyricist, and the details and characters he introduces to the listener are easy to connect with, but not too easy to the point where it feels like it's stuffed with relatable filler. Imagine a nice mold of singer-songwriter personality with the showmanship of a young Elton John, just not quite on that Rocket Man level. That's Zeros in a rock-filled nutshell. He wastes no time in breaking right into it, as the raucous opener, you better believe, knows its place as the bait to hook us on the rest of the album. And honestly, that bait feels electrifying to chase for the first 5 songs on the record, but after that dividing moment Daniel You're Still a Child plays, I think Declan loosens his grip a bit and never fully gets it back. The sources of inspiration are going to be a big talking point with Zeros, so I'll try not to spend too long here, but when you've got this many influences stacked up, from the Fleetwood Mac like Emily to the Shins as hell indie rocker twice your size, you're gonna attract some confused head tilts, and some of those aren't gonna be out of excitement, that's for sure. Back half blues happen, and it can be difficult to keep the momentum going forward even if there are some genuinely good ideas thrown in the mix. It's just the execution. It feels way too familiar on some of these songs, and it's impossible for me to overlook. Now, the good news is that this is only for a selection of tracks in Act 2, so let's move over to the tracklist breakdown, because Act 1 is where some of the most satisfyingly great alternative tunes I've heard all year live. Might as well start with the song that lit a fire inside my mind immediately as soon as I pressed play, The Key to Life on Earth. I know this was the second single he dropped, but this whole rollout somehow slipped under my radar until May. But when this popped up in my recommendations on Spotify, I couldn't believe how amazing the song I was hearing actually was. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was one of my top 5 most played songs of the year. It's just so goddamn replayable, it's not even funny. The man wastes no time in ripping on the privileged rich kids, but more importantly than anything else with this one, every single element of the track is alarmingly catchy to the point where I'm constantly humming the synth part, shouting back random lyrics, air guitaring, or chanting along to that epic outro. It's truly his best creation yet, and of course, one of the best songs of the year. Beautiful Faces served as the album's actual lead single, and if you're giving this absolute tune and a half a listen, you need to play it loudly because it's what this deserves. I feel like romping around the streets at night with this as the soundtrack. It's massive, it's marvelous, the guitar strut sweeps you off your feet, and that chorus carries you all the way back home from the dive bar. There's nothing wrong with shooting for the stars, and I think Be an Astronaut proves that Declan is capable of handling these larger-than-life moments, filled with a choir-like backing vocal, massive drum spikes, and of course a soaring sense of confidence. I really like the Beatles vibe that I get from the piano intro before they cut loose into some sort of beast. He mentions this character Daniel again, which actually naturally leads me to mention the also excellent Daniel, You're Still a Child. That song has the best bass work on the LP, just gonna throw that one out there. It's so fun to bop around to as those shimmering keys dance right on top of it. The rhymes and descriptive storytelling make this such a crucial track for Zeros. It's great to hear Declan dive into the psyche behind people who go off the rails or else get sucked into some black hole-like thing where they lose their way early on, and sometimes it's not even fully their fault. Plus that little guitar solo before and after the bridge, it's a chef's kiss for me. Definitely spin this one even if you don't get to the whole album. That second half downward turn I mentioned starts with the all too familiar Emily, which breezes by without too much impact, minus a few great lyrical tidbits, and the electro-dipped Rapture is probably the only song that actively annoys me with its repetition, but beyond that, the other songs back here aren't at all bad, they pale a bit in comparison. As he's wrapping things up, I do think the album hits an uptick in quality with Sagittarius A, which, as a fellow Sagittarius, I appreciate that and a nice play on words, and eventually Darling, but it's the latter of those that really quenches my thirst for his more adventurous side. There's a beautiful Beatles reference tucked into the lyrics and a glowing sense of glamour to it all, and while I'm not usually crazy about pitch-shifting vocals, whatever the fuck he has going on for the hook, that somehow really worked for me. Declan McKenna has the heart of a rock and roll superstar, along with a lot of the songs that it actually takes to cement your legacy as a budding star in the making. So, with album 2, despite some of the similar sonic highways taken, and a lot of the influences being quite apparent, I really did enjoy this record. It's on par with his debut, and I'm going to give this record Zeros a 3.5 out of 5. If you want to catch my thoughts on his debut, what do you think about the car, then tap this annotation or tap here for another recent rock review. All of my socials, including my Patreon, my merch, everything like that, it's all in the link tree linked down below. And if you want to catch me outside of YouTube, I'm streaming over on Twitch at ARTV Games. Other than that, I'll catch you soon for more right here on ARTV.